Hi class, my name is Emma Miller and today we're going to be talking about child labor, exploitation, and trafficking in Latin America, and more specifically we'll go into Bolivia and Argentina. Thanks for watching. For this presentation we will be going over a lot. We're going to start with the definitions of exploitation and labor, and then different aspects of migration that make people vulnerable. And then we're going to go into a case study and hear actual voices of victims. And then we'll look at the language expressed through different websites and screenshots of the communication processes. And we'll look at the well-intended and problematic language used in this issue. So taking a look at the different definitions people have had for child labor and exploitation and the exposure that we have, I found a lot of definitions in my research, particularly from the Journal of Economic Issues by Thomas Paley. He discussed that there was kind of two veins that people fell into when defining this issue. One was a labor market and economic development problem, and then the second one was defining it as a human rights problem. And then through my research, I also became aware of the evolving nature of human trafficking, and the issue is both domestic and international. So taking into consideration that this problem of child labor in Latin America extends within the countries as well as outside of them. And then throughout this evolution, most information has been found from non-governmental organizations, which is really good that people are being proactive without government incentive. But it does make it hard when establishing policy to help solve the issue. Okay, so before we continue on to the case study and taking a look at Argentina and Bolivia and the migration patterns that help the traffickers claim their victims, I think it's important to remember what we learned in Module 2 through the Encyclopedia of Human Trafficking regarding exploitation and forced labor. These are two things that are reoccurring through my research. So, exploitation is to use or take advantage of a lack of resources or a dependent relationship to gain substantial control over an individual's independence and decision-making. And then forced labor is involuntary work acquired through recruitment and or movement of persons through abuse of power, including force, fraud, or coercion, that may result in inadequate or no compensation and restriction of movement. The definitions that we saw in the previous slide are important as we follow this case study and we think about the communication processes being used to discuss this issue. So through a case study published in 2005, Tanya Bastia breaks down the experiences of victims within the realm of child labor and human trafficking. This particular example was recorded as victims were brought from Bolivia to Argentina. So problems that she addresses about the communication that we use is that there is not a lot of research in Latin America regarding human trafficking and child labor because it is so embedded in the culture and people do not have a clear definition of what they are doing wrong. It is often not distinguished from human smuggling, and this country is lagging behind other countries when it comes to instating policy. It is also deeply embedded in traditional forms of patronage. As Bastia interviewed these victims in her case study, she kept 4 areas of the study in mind, and those areas were the reasons to migrate, the modes of recruitment, the working conditions, and the consequences of child trafficking. So themes found within the victims' experiences. The victims featured in this case study were named Maria, Isabel, Juan, and Miriam. I think it's important to have names associated with the crime. And then all of the victims migrated from Bolivia to Argentina through the processes of family pressure, uncontrollable factors with their personal life, or promises of a better life through recruitment. So either this was their only choice to support their family, or they were recruited with promises of financial gain or a better life. So victims and migration. Migration can turn into trafficking, and trafficking can also pick on the flows of migration, according to the study by Bastia. At the time these victims were trafficked, the migration patterns had recently changed from men migrating for work in rural areas to women migrating for work in Argentina's capital. So there was a mining crisis in Bolivia that caused men to stop working and then sending out their child daughters to Argentina for money. So victim stories. Victims were connected to debt bondage in a lot of cases and were kept in slavery-like conditions because they owed money on their documents from coming into the country. And then in some cases, victims had parents that had passed away or were unable to work. And then 2 of the victims were recruited in a group of 12 girls to come and work in a textile shop. So that was blatant trafficking. And then reasons to migrate that could impact trafficking and child exploitation and labor are economic issues within the country, and then related to poverty, limited working opportunities to help the family or support them, seasonal migration where they come and migrate for work and then are put in positions where they can't leave, and then parents' inability to provide. And then finally, gender-based discrimination. So earlier I mentioned that it was the men migrating, and then it slowly turned to women migrating and being trafficked to work in the capital in textile shops. So just a little bit more about the victims and the themes that come along with their stories. They were unpaid for months, most of them. They were recruited or migrated young, like 15. They worked long hours, 12-hour days with 30-minute breaks, and there was different types of labor within these victims. So there was one that was working to pick tomatoes and was paid 15 cents a box, and she had to do 50 boxes a day. And then 2 of them were in textile shops. So different types of work, but similar themes. Okay, so now that we know that there are real-life examples, we've seen victims and their story of this problem of child labor and exploitation in Latin America, you can take a look at connecting it to communication. So these are screenshots taken from the Bureau of International Labor Affairs. The first one is telling, and it does provoke you to want to learn more, but it does lack in a few ways, which we'll discuss. And then the second screenshot is what you click when you look at Argentina. So there's no sense of urgency, it just lays out what Argentina produces, and not until you go deeper into the document does it talk about any statistics of trafficking. So here we see another image of human trafficking, and it says know the signs. There's a man sitting in subpar conditions, doesn't look like a healthy living situation. There is a paragraph describing the problem, saying that it does happen in plain sight. The trafficking is not hidden or underground. It does happen in plain sight, so that's a good use of communication and awareness. And then also it gives a list of people may be trafficked if they, and you can continue down the list to learn more about it. So here's another image of the same website. After doing further digging and trying to find more information about solving the problem on child labor, it shows a child dirty and doing construction work. That's not always the case when it comes to child labor and human trafficking, so I think it's important to represent all types of instances of human trafficking when promoting change and policy. For the issues with communication processes, through these screenshots you've seen in previous slides, they don't give the full scope of the problem. So the first image was a girl carrying bricks on top of her head to be building something. But as we have learned through this research, human trafficking is happening more in urban areas and in the inner city of Argentina, so it's not quite the representation that is accurate. And then as you dig deeper into the website, you find Argentina and just what they produce. There's no sense of urgency with this page on the website. And then the second screenshot is the man in the condition, so it gives the impression that this is not happening to women and children. And then the third is a girl in the dirt, very dirty, laying brick, but it doesn't give an understanding of human trafficking and child labor in agricultural industry or services. So industry is the production of garments, and services is street begging, performing, windshield washing, handing out flyers, caregiving, or domestic work. So these are well intended, but they don't give the entirety of the story, which is important if we want to stop it. So the last thing that we should cover is how to improve in the future. So these images we looked at are all well intended and it's a start, but I think the changes that need to be done is that there need to be more testimonials and case studies as seen with Tanya's work, and more accurate pictures of the human trafficking issue. And then just bringing awareness to the victims and going into places where trafficking is high and talking to people about their options and about what could happen if they move to go work somewhere else.